Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And last week I made a prediction tier list anticipating where the specializations would be resolving in terms of their potency with regards to PvP in Midnight in World of Warcraft. And today is accountability hour. That prediction tier list that I made is on the screen right now, and we are going to be reviewing spec by spec how accurate that prediction really was, and then reassessing and readjusting the specializations to where I think that they are now currently as a result of those changes. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. I should also note that there is apparently bugs happening. I saw Meep tweeting out that there is a cataclysmic major bug with Mistweaver Monk at the moment. I have also experienced some things and some specializations here towards the end of the week that I didn't experience in the beginning parts of the week, like durability on Shadow Priest. So I don't really know if the game is literally rupturing day by day or something, or if you combine different talents together and it breaks something and then something's overperforming, underperforming. I'm gonna do my best to try and just take it as I have, but there are bugs that are currently kind of disrupting the overall flow and balance of the game. So Frost Mage here on S+, it's the number one range. It should honestly be on its own tier. It does the most damage ever. 2 charges of Ice Barrier, just completely busted with overpowered barrier PvP talent. 2 ways to go invisible, and then you play Night Elf. There's 3 ways to go invisible. It resets the diminishing return timers for players, which is terrible for new players who are trying to learn the game and how to track DRs. That mechanic is just incredibly frustrating across the board, and it's basically like they have 6 abilities that are just I can't die, aside from their ice block buttons, which are then we go up to like 8. And also there's like a ton of keybinds with all those different invisibilities and barriers and altars, and I don't really know how they could be happy with Frost Mage in its current iteration, because it's not approachable for a new player. If you're a new player and you don't know how to use any of those tools, you don't have all the keybinds down, you can die instantly. But if you're a pro player and you have all those keybinds, you're completely unkillable, completely frustrating to play against, and just it's terrible for the game as a whole. It's not approachable for new players. It's not good for pro players. They need to do something about it. I'm very concerned that it's going to completely dominate the tournament. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do have great concerns that it's going to completely dominate the tournament because of this defensive utility at the pro level. But it's also not very accessible for new players with how it's designed, with so many different keybinds, with all of these defensive utilities that break the UI and reset diminishing return trackers. So, but regardless, it is completely dominant at the moment. Beast Mastery Hunter with my prediction. I think I'm still pretty happy with it here on S+ as well. It's just a straightforward, easy specialization that does a tremendous amount of throughput. It doesn't have a lot of utility or support, which maybe is one downside to it, which is somewhat making me want to drop it a tier just because of that. I think I'm going to wiggle it down. I think that up here you've got to be pretty much just like all strength and almost no weakness to be on the S+ tier. I do think the lack of utility to support allies can be challenging in solo shuffle, for example, maybe in some situations in Battleground Blitz, and also with your pets getting kited by Z-axis maps and like that, and running around from the top level of Warsong Gulch and all the way back. There are some downsides to it that I think warrant dropping it from like this God mode tier. Devourer Demon Hunter, I took a kind of a big shot with pumping this one into S+. I think that it is really good. I think it's really strong. I think as far as ladder play, that it's definitely somewhere up here in S+. I kind of want to leave S+ literally reserved for just one of each role, if I can. So I might drop Devourer down as well, just for the sake of, I think I was pretty close on predictions with these guys as far as them being up here at the top, but I kind of want to leave this as exclusionary as possible for like what I think the best possible spec is in that row. Windwalker Monk is phenomenal still. Obviously, like Mage and Windwalker, you just didn't see any changes done to you, and you guys are just completely crushing it with how much damage you're able to do in your cooldown windows. Windwalker does have a little bit of defense lacking as opposed to Frost Mage, or Frost Mage is just the whole package. Also, the damage output for Frost Mage is like it's all in Ray of Frost. So if you're a pro player, you know how to get Ray of Frost off successfully. You just one-shot people, no problem. But if you're a new player and you can't ever get the cast off because you don't know how to set it up, you can't do anything to win the game. It's just, to me, Frost Mage is fundamentally misaligned with every design goal that they intended for a class in this expansion. It's keybind dense, has way too many defensives. It's all damage in one shots. It requires pro level knowledge to be able to win. It needs its damage desperately redistributed out of Ray into its other abilities. So just any random mage logs in for the first time can Frostbolt and Flurry and Ice Lance a couple times and maybe take out a target. It needs so much work to get it from where it currently is, where it's just, in my opinion, ruining the game. But Windwalker Monk, do I drop it because of its defense? I think is the only real debate here. Do I think it's the same as a warrior or enhanced with shaman? I think it's honestly pretty close. I think that I could honestly drop it down to here with warrior and such. Prop paladin, I think I was too overly zealous putting up here on S+. The damage nerf did actually feel significant after testing it. You still have a lot of defense. It's terrible in battlegrounds. I would not recommend that you take this into battlegrounds. It's a terrible flag carrier. It doesn't really offer anything on any map that I can really even recall. Like maybe you could spin a flag by yourself at a base or something like that. But Ret can also do that, and Ret's actually surprisingly good when we get to that one. But Prot, I would say, is probably just like fallen in line with pretty much all the other tanks. Maybe even honestly a little bit weaker than the other tanks, which is good. They resolved that issue is actually gone. My prediction on this, being worried that they didn't nerf the burst component of it, just nerfing its overall wouldn't be enough. But I think that's probably more in line with the other tanks. Arms Warrior is very good. Now on the ladder, the only thing, though, is it has a weakness. Mages and hunters, you can get kited. Multiple range lobbies can be very difficult, but aside from that, you just do so much damage. So I think S is fair, but you do have a weakness, prevent you from going up into S+. Enhancement Shaman, I kind of want to do this. I'm not going to lie. I think I'm going to do it. I'm putting Enhancement Shaman on S+ right now, at least for ladder. It could also be very good for tournament, but for ladder, I think it is. It does a lot of damage, very easy. If you're running the Stormbringer build, but Totemic also doing a lot of damage, has a huge amount of healing also, tons of utility and disruption, has the capabilities of taking out Mage, which is so prominent at the moment. I think this is actually warranted. This could be reckless on my part, but I think it's one of the best. I think it is the best melee. Feral Druid with the 4% buff is a lot better, but it's still very complicated relative to a lot of other melee DPS, so it's harder to get the results from it. But I think that it's warranted in the S tier. I think that Enhanced Warrior and Feral Warrior are going to be really good combinations likely moving into the future, so I'm going to leave that there with my prediction. We talked about moving these guys down. Marksmanship Hunter, I think, is still deserving of S tier. Obviously, it does have some weaknesses, getting ran down in some lobbies and disarm, and if players save all their crowd control for your cooldown windows, it's still very feast and famine. Which is another thing with Enhance. It just feels very feast and famine. Your cooldowns are the only time you move a health bar, and you move it way too fast. I've seen clips of like Seedu's team getting eradicated in 2 milliseconds by one rapid fire. So to me, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done as far as distributing damage out of cooldowns and preventing one-shots and into sustain for it. But within the current balance tuning, it's definitely S tier. Devastation Evoker, this is the guy that I always put up here, and it's like one of the least popular specs, but I swear it's really strong. I swear Time Stop is a really strong mechanic defensively. It has good enough damage output. It has great harassment. It's great into all these melee DPS. I'm going to leave it here. I think that it is S. Preservation Evoker, changes were actually noticeable. It does not feel like it's just an auto win anymore, which is great. I do think the healer balance is likely the best of everything. Maybe the melee DPS balance is the best of everything, but the healer balance is the second, and range DPS is the worst overall. But Preservation Evoker is still really good. It's still the best flag carrier in Battlegrounds. I think I was right about dropping from S+ to S in that capacity. It's still really good. Still has a lot of damage with burst. I think that I'm going to leave it here on S. Resto Druid, I don't know if I want to wiggle it around S+ or not. Again, the healer balance is really close that like in a tournament, we're probably only going to see Druid. Why are we only going to see Druid? It's the best into a mage, and it's also the best with a mage because it provides purge protection to the team. And it's so durable that the hots can just tick while the shields are up or while they're invisible, and they can recover, and then all the extra stuns that it provides are very strong as well. So I do think like Prez and Druid will probably still be the tournament dominant healers, but they're also really good on ladder. So I think I'm going to leave them both on S, and maybe there's no S+ healer at the moment. Outlaw Rogue, I honestly think Outlaw Rogue is really good. I think it's just hard to play, but I do think it's really good. I'm jumping it up to here, to S tier. I think Outlaw Rogue is very strong at the moment, and it's just Not played because it's complicated, but I think it's still very strong. Subtlety Rogue is the same thing. I was actually surprised by this spec, and maybe I'm shifting way too many specs up onto S, but I swear melee balance is getting a lot closer. Subtlety Rogue is really good. It's just commanding force right now. And I don't know if it's because of the item level bump on the weapons or what happened, but like it can run people down. Now in tournament setting again, we'll probably see Outlaw more than Subtlety because Outlaw doesn't rely on stuns and you can't stun a mage. So everything in the tournament is basically pivoted around mage. But for ladder gameplay, where you're not guaranteed to have those perfect setups, they can both definitely excel. Frosty K, I think A+, it should be lower than these guys. I think it's just too easy to shut down relative to a lot of the other DPS at the moment. So I think that main reason is why I'm going to leave it here on A+. Havoc, I think, deservingly jumped up to A+ on my prediction. I somewhat want to put it on S tier. I'm not going to lie, but maybe there's way too many specs on S tier. But I do actually think it's really good. I actually think it's really good. I want to say the melee balance is the best it's been. I think maybe Survival and Frost are kind of a little bit less. Against Feast or Famine, the cooldowns are still too strong. The damage outside isn't. But Havoc now with the Eldraki Reaver build is doing a lot of damage. I think I'm going to leave it on A+ for right now, just because I think this one-shot burst damage, it kind of counters you. And also DK struggle with Warriors and Windwalkers, so I think it's fair to leave you guys down here. But I do think Havoc is really strong. Assassination Rogue is very good as well. Tremendous burst damage, although I think it does struggle with preservation, removing your bleeds and such. I want to say it's worse than these guys, but it's taking over the #1 position. I don't know if it's just hyper or you know what's going on, but when we do our data analysis video, we can see what's happening with the rogue specs. Like, it's just most recently buffed, so it's got all the hype for everybody logging onto it. All 3 rogue specs are really good for different reasons. Subtlety Rogue is just constant stuns every 16 seconds and can take out a target by itself. Outlaw Rogue is just a tremendous amount of sustained damage with a decent amount of control. And then Assassination Rogue is just huge burst and growth. I think it's got the highest burst of any of the specs, but it's also the highest ramp and has more significant downtime. And I think for those reasons, like I think it's less durable too. So I actually want to say it's a little weaker, which maybe that's a hot take. Fury Warrior, again, situationally it's good, but Arms Warrior is just doing so much more overall. I don't think it's awful though. I think I might drop it. I think I'm going to drop it to A tier from A+. I still think it's good. It's just the specs that it does well into, like Shadow and AF, I still think are not necessarily going to be taking over. Shadow Priest, Shadow Priest still doesn't have the finishing power. Again, like, it's well designed for what their intentions were with this expansion. But since there are other specializations that haven't hit those intended goal points, they just completely outshine you and you just feel weak. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can just give Shadow Priest more one-shot damage, and then, yeah, there we go, it's balanced. But then we're just playing the War Within again, as opposed to shifting damage more away from burst cooldowns and more into your filler abilities in a PvP situation. I want to say it's still at least A+, although I feel like I need to start delineating between these guys, because I don't know if it's 100% they deserve to all be on the same tier. They're definitely all weaker than mage specs, which I was completely wrong about. Someone down here when we get there. I'll leave it on A+ for now. Finishing power is the main issue. You kind of just feel like you're just trying to stay alive for 5 minutes before you're allowed to win the game. Meanwhile, everyone else can win during that 5-minute period and still beat you even after the 5-minute period. But it is a lot better in Shuffle. I kind of hope that they just address the one-shots, address some of the defense on some of these other specs, because it likely could be very good. Affliction Warlock actually has much stronger single target in the Shadow, much more finishing power from my personal experience playing it yesterday. With Drain Soul builds, you actually can be pretty lethal in a lot of those situations. A lot of stacked UAs and Haunts and Drain Soul procs, you can actually be very lethal in a single target situation, which is not where you're supposed to be with AoE. I haven't played the Hellcaller build. I thought that you need different stats for it, so I won't be able to really try that out too much, but it's trending upward on overall stats, and I don't know if that's just a couple of the AFLOCs at the top. Again, when we look at the data analytics, I'm going to look at some other rating thresholds as well, like 1800 to 2K and things like that, to see what the entry level experience is like. I would say the entry level experience is probably bad on both Shadow and AF, but if you're like a veteran pro at them, you can probably make them work. But I severely think they're weaker than Mage. Mage is just completely taking over every other range DPS in my opinion. Balanced Druid I actually think is weak. The buff to Starfire did nothing. I tried it out and it still does like 7% of your overall damage. It doesn't even move a health bar like 1%. The damage tuning on most filler abilities on classes outside of cooldowns is just non-existent. The spells don't do damage, even though I've seen modifiers for like Starfire does 120% more damage. It still only does 7% of my overall damage with 120% modifier. Like the filler abilities are just so off the mark that they just don't do any. I actually am doing, I think the only time Boomkin isn't down on the bottom of casters is if you're playing with a Subtlety Rogue in 3s, which at that point they'd probably rather play with literally anyone else, but you can make it work. You can get carried by it, but I think Boomkin is actually the weakest caster right now. It just has no finishing power unlike Shadow Priest. The only thing you have is that you can run, which is good into these melee. You can run, shapeshift, travel form, and run around and run, but your finishing power is just non-existent. Relative to the other casters. Ellie Shaman, I do think, has finishing power. This is why I kind of want to, I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to drop these guys down here, leave Ellie here, because I think Ellie and Destro have good finishing power. With Ascendance, and if you play Stormbringer in some cases as well with Elemental, you have way better finishing power, and the buffs were more noticeable as well for Farseer, especially in Shuffle with faster dampening on Ellie. I think I'm going to drop these dot classes down here in tier. I think whether it's defense or lack of finishing power, there's something that feels significantly lower. Destruction Warlock, I would say, is actually the best caster. Not so much that the Incinerate and Conflict buff were like super integral. It's nice that they got it, but it just has more finishing power. I think the Soulfire being on a different school than Chaos Bolt is a big advantage. That's something like Arcane doesn't have at all as an offensive toolkit, but I think their finishing power is just better. Durability is either close to the same and better finishing power. I think it puts them a tier above at the moment. Mistweaver Monk, now if you're playing the Spinning Crane Kick build and you're fighting pet classes, God mode, best healer in the game in those situations. However, if you don't have those situations, I think you're definitely behind Prez and Resto Druid, so it's a bit situational for you. And I don't know how impactful the bug is that Meep was pointing out on Twitter as far as like to all of your builds, if that just means you can only play the Spinning Crane Kick build, or if this bug literally just happened randomly in the middle of the night on Friday or something. I don't know. But I think it's still A+, assuming that the bug is addressed or doesn't affect like significant portions of your builds. Disc Priest, I think, is A+ at least. I think it's really good at the moment, whether you're playing the Oracle build for safety, or personally, I like the Void Weaver build. It just does so much damage, completely different playstyle, and if you're not ready for it, it can be tough. You can fall behind and just feel like it's terrible compared to the Oracle build, but I think Disc Priest provides a lot of throughput right now, which is providing a significant amount of value in almost any scenario. I'm actually seeing more of it even in rated 3v3 as well. Now we've got the A tier. We moved Fury Warrior down here. Ret Paladin, I don't think is A tier. I want to actually bump Ret up to S. I'm not going to lie. It doesn't do as much one-shot damage. They nerfed Templar. Great. They nerfed Templar. They buffed Herald. It does more sustained damage. And Eternal Flame is randomly healing a lot. I don't know if they accidentally buffed Eternal Flame for Ret and not Holy or something. I don't know, because Eternal Flame healing is very high. You do a lot of healing. If you're not leaning into that healing with Eternal Flame as Herald, you're missing out on the main advantages of Ret. And it still does good damage during its wings. It doesn't completely, clock you out like Enhancement Shaman Burst probably, or Windwalker Burst, but it's more than satisfactory to be able to win. I want to say Ret Paladin is at least still S. I'm jumping it up. I'm jumping it up to S from A. I was worried about it, but after seeing it, I think that it's not landed in nearly as bad of a spot as it was down here. Unholy DK, also, I think it was too harsh. I think it's at least tied with Frost for different reasons. I think it's just a bit more sustained, a bit more consistent. It can't be shut out just immediately by a disarm is the advantage, but it doesn't have the top-end burst potential that Frost has as a trade-off. But it's actually really good, and I think these guys are kind of sleeper. I've ran into a couple players playing these, and I think they're kind of sleeper. Only reason I'm dropping DK down here is just because I think it struggles a lot with Warriors and Windwalkers, and they're so prevalent. But I do think they are just very close to cresting up into the competition, and I think Havoc is also at this moment in time. Survival Hunter, do I think it's worse than Fury Warrior? I think that it just can't compete with how simple and easy it is to pull off BM. BM is just so passive, instant. You can play in a safe zone the entire game. You can win just passively with damage, win with crowd control and aggression. I don't think it even comes close with the drawbacks you have as survival. And then Marksmanship Hunter, the burst potential I think is way higher. Like, they took your burst potential away. I noticed that on survival. I don't know if the sustain was really enough to compensate. Like, you don't feel awful, right? Like, an A tier is not awful, but I think there's a slight difference between it. I think I'm going to leave it down here with Fury. for now. Guardian Druid, not going to really move around too much. I think it's honestly a good flag carrier, and I think maybe that would be the reason that I would put it above other tanks at the moment, is just because it's a really good flag carrier. But for the most part, I think all the tanks are ending up in a pretty similar scenario. It's just coming down to like which map you get in a battleground scenario as far as which one is actually better than the others. I'd maybe just say Guardian is just better than the others on overall play, but they're very close. Holy Priest, I think I was right about this. I think it's like third from the bottom on healing. It's actually performed better than I expected from the couple times I've seen it, and I think it's mostly just because it's actually really synergizing with Subtlety Rogue and like Fire Mage and Frost Mage, and has a lot of instant burst CC that I'm seeing in 3v3. And the mana changes were noticeable. It doesn't just tap out relative to the other healers. I'm going to leave it on A tier. I think it is still a bit weaker, but not a huge amount. Again, healer balance I think is a lot closer. Resto Shaman I think is also second from the bottom, or the bottom at the moment. It really depends on the situation. Restoration Shaman does not have the type of straightforward throughput and instant healing that Holy Paladin has to recover, so I don't think it's as new player friendly. But after you get to the moderate level, advanced level, I think it does slightly edge out over Paladin in some cases. But I think the immunities are just still really good with how much one shots are going on. But at the same time, with how prevalent Hunter is, I think Shaman struggles playing with hunters and playing against them, and they're so popular, whereas Paladin doesn't have that trade-off. If in some cases actually better because of sacrificed on freezing traps to break traps. So I like Shaman and Paladin are very close. I think I'll drop Shaman down from A and put them kind of at the same tier here on B, but they're very close. Arcane Mage, again, it has all the cheeky offense, but it's just so much stationary ramp and obvious damage that can be interrupted relative to Frost or Fire right now, which obviously with Fire I got to do this, get it way away from Arcane because it's not even close. I was very wrong about Fire. Arcane Mage just still is very stationary, long ramp, hard casting all of its spells. Honestly, it's just balanced, right, relative to Frost or Fire, with how either instant or unpreventable a lot of the damage happens. And having 2 charges of Ray of Frost is like having 2 Doom Winds. It's just the frequency that they can do the damage at, and if you know how to set it up, is absolutely wild relative to Arcane. Arcane is just still struggling. Demonology, I do think, is the worst caster, though, overall. It has absolutely no burst damage whatsoever. Sustain is very subpar. Its defense is maybe its only advantage. So you basically just kind of exist in the game and hope that you live long enough that your pet's little tickle attacks that can do something to win. And then you try and annoy the enemy with how much crowd control you have. Which you still have a decent amount, but its demonology has fallen a lot in PvP, which is very interesting because it's so good in PvE. But PvP, I think it's definitely fallen off. I'm actually gonna drop it down here. Do I drop it down? Am I that mean? I'm gonna drop it down here. I think it's warranted. It's just, it has no like moment where you're like, oh my god, I'm popping off. Unfortunately, with just damage tuning on all of its abilities, the Hennigal Dam buff was just not a noticeable amount. Unfortunately. And then Augmentation Evoker, again, it could be better than this, but I pretty much never see it. It could be better than this. So take that into consideration. If you really want to pull it off, you can. You can see there's definitely some issues here with specs towards the bottom. We didn't talk about Fire, though. I just kind of jumped it up here. The main reason Fire Mage is jumping up here is because Frost Fire, which is a hero talent tree, when you shoot a meteor, it gives you an instant Frostfire bolt, and that combo does like 70% of someone's health. And if you combust with it, obviously, and then you chain in with more Fire Blast and Pyros, you just can bulldoze somebody over, and you're still decently durable. I will say I think the defense is lower than Frost. I think the double barrier is a big deal for that, but you do have the invisibility still to be annoying, and the trade-off of being like pretty much all instant cast. So I think I'm gonna leave Fire a bit weaker, but I think it's warranted in being on the S tier at the moment. And this is just my assessment right now for the week. I think there has been bugs that might be tweaking some of these specs up or down, depending on given situations. But that's where I'm currently vibing at the moment. And I know a lot of you guys wanted this tier list out, so I'm done my best here to get it to you. So thank you guys very much for tuning in and watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.